Welcome to Color Commentary, a podcast where the stories shaping our world are told in black and white first, and then we dig into their deeper meaning in full color. Each week, I bring you the news like this. First, we start with what I call the black and white section, a clear, straight shooting rundown of the facts in the tradition of the greats, Ed Bradley, Walter Cronkite, and the classic voices of journalism. Then we shift into the color commentary section, where I add my own analysis, perspectives, and critiques. Sometimes it's just me. Sometimes I'll have a guest, like today. But the goal is always the same: to tell the truth, connect the dots, and leave you thinking about what comes next. Let's get into it. So this week, we're diving into a clash that says a lot about where black media is right now. The public beef between the Joe Budden podcast and the Native Land Pod. At first, it looked like your typical online dust-up. Two shows taking shots and drawing lines about tone and approach. But underneath that noise is something real. A conversation about class, authenticity, and who gets to decide what smart looks like in black spaces. And for me, this one hits home. To help break this down, I've got a guest who knows a thing or two about authentic storytelling in black media. Torraine Walker is a digital storyteller, journalist, and brand strategist who's worked with everyone from Bounce TV to community movement builders. He's also worked with me before, and I consider him a friend. And if you haven't checked it out, there are some archive photos of him, myself, and Chris Stewart called Three the Hard Way. Trying to get the scheduling right, but definitely a firecracker of a show. His writing has appeared in Teen Vogue, Huffington Post, Splinter News, and more. And he's built a career on finding authentic voices and making sure those voices get heard. Torraine, welcome to Color Commentary, good brother. How you doing, man?
Oh, man, thank you for having me on, Charles, man. It's always an honor to chop it up with you, man, and be on your shows, man. Good for having me.
Well, man, you're one of my favorite people in the space. You're one of the people that check in on me. And I knew, even before you hit me in the DM, I knew this was going to be something that hit your radar the way it hit mine. And it probably hit us both for different reasons. But before we go into that, let me give these people the facts of what happened. Can I do that real quick? Right, so everybody listening, here are the facts, black and white. In mid-October, a clip from the Joe Budden podcast, affectionately known as the JBP, it went viral. And it featured Joe Budden and his co-host, Mark Lamont Hill, Ish, Ice, and Queen's Flip, arguing over whether the show needed to smarten up. Mark, a respected scholar and professor, challenged the team to elevate their discourse. Joe pushed back, arguing that the show already connects deeply with real people. I mean, it was passionate, messy, instantly viral. And then there was this other parts of Queen's Flip and Mark Lamont Hill. You know, one got called a sucker. Mark Lamont Hill didn't like that, kind of bucked up. You know, stuff that happens in a barbershop type setting. It kind of played out there for everybody to see. And for me as a black dude that goes to barbershops and grew up in that environment, you know, to me, it was a little bit more much ado about nothing. But within days, the Native Land Pod, or the NLP, hosted by Angela Rye, Tiffany Cross, Bakari Sellers, and Andrew Gillum. I don't know if Bakari is a permanent host now. I know it started with just Gillum, Tiffany Cross, and Angela Rye, but maybe he's there for good now, or maybe he's a guest. I'm not sure. But they released an episode titled Joe Budden's Podcast and the Dumbing Down of America. So in that episode, they took JBP to task. The host suggested that the show's style, its humor, its arguments, its occasional chaos was a symptom of a broader decline in intellectual discourse. They said it reflects how we often reward entertainment over thought, sound over substance. Angela Rye said the issue wasn't Joe specifically, it was what his show represents. Platforms with massive reach that shape narratives without enough responsibility. Tiffany Cross chimed in saying some outlets dilute the medicine. They mix just enough truth with spectacle to keep the audience hooked, but not enough depth to move the conversation forward. Might I also add, she also said that there's some opinions out there in the world that she just will never engage with, and Queen's Flip seemed to be one of those people from what she said. Bakari Sellers added another layer, pointing out that figures like Mark Lamont Hill often find themselves bridging two worlds, the barbershop and the boardroom, and that friction plays out in real time. Still, that dumbing down title hit a nerve. Joe Budden fired back the following week, and he said, plain and simple, make your point without my name in it. Torraine, he said it with a little bit more fervor than that, but he also accused the native land of clout chasing, using his name for clicks, and called it hypocritical that the NLP crew admitted they hadn't even watched the full JBP episode. If you don't watch the podcast and admit you don't watch the podcast, Budden said, then I do have a problem with you forming a deep opinion about it. He also defended the JBP's record, reminding people that his show has been covering serious issues, politics, culture, criminal justice for years, long before some networks caught up. That exchange lit up social media on Reddit, X, and YouTube. Fans and critics split into two camps. Some argued that native land was being elitist, weaponizing intellectualism against a more grassroots voice. Others felt Joe was being defensive, dodging a valid critique about the responsibility that comes with reach. I might add, if somebody said that they didn't actually listen to the full thing, I don't know how much of a critique that can actually be. Back to the point at hand, though. One user summed it up like this: native land is the talented 10th, Joe is the hood Harvard. Don't know how I feel about that line, but it was out there. Later, Bakari Sellers tried to cool it down, saying he actually likes Joe's show and respects how it connects with the everyday listener. Conversations like the one Joe and Mark had happened all over the country, he said. They just made theirs public. But what, and not really Joe and Mark, it was really Mark and Queen's Flip. I want to be clear about that. But what this really exposed wasn't a personal beef, it was a class divide. Native land sits in this polished, credentialed lane of Black thought, people who speak from power, policy, and professional polish. Joe Budden podcast lives in a populist lane, the unfiltered, street-informed, deeply cultural perspective that doesn't wait for permission to speak. It's the old question dressed in new clothes. Who gets to speak for Black America? Who defines smart? And that's the Black and white. Now, let's add some color. Okay. So just before I start touring, was that a fair breakdown? I wanted to make sure I got my journalistic principles out the way on that one.
No, I think it was an excellent breakdown, and it's an excellent breakdown of the situation and some of the mentalities around it. So, no, you on point, brother. You got it.
All good, man. Well, let me just say this. Let's talk about it, because let's talk about what's really happening here. I'm gonna just be straight with you, and I know this might surprise some people. I'm on Joe's side. And before anybody gets it twisted, let me tell you why. It's not about being anti-intellectual or dismissing education. Of course, not with me. I love education. I talk about it every day and the importance of it. But this is about recognizing condescension when I see it. And the native lands approach, especially that title, it reeked of it. And that's the problem when you say dumbing down. When you call someone else's platform the dumbing down of America, you're not offering critique. You're just looking down. You're turning your nose up. You're saying, we over here having real conversations, and you out here playing sambo or entertaining the stupid masses. I think that it was more insulting to Joe's audience than it was even to Joe. And so I just want to bring you in on this, man. Like, where just for you, Torraine, like, you've worked in digital storytelling, you've worked in journalism for years, you've done incredible work with me, Chris, a bunch of people. You've helped brands and organizations find their authentic voice. So when you saw this beef play out, what was your first reaction? Did the dumbing down title sit right with you?
Let me put it like this. I think the dumbing down title sat right with me because that's what I would expect from somebody like the Native Land podcast. And let me explain what I mean. In 1933, Dr. Carter G. Woodson wrote a book called The Miseducation of the Negro. And in that book, for those who haven't read that book, and it's a seminal work, I would advise people to read it. He basically talks about how the so-called educated class of Black people have gotten so removed and so distant from the masses of Black people that they basically have no use. They basically are of no use to the Black masses. They basically have become a self-congratulatory society that's focused on getting accolades from everybody outside the community they were built to serve. And that title and that show and Angela Rye's reaction basically says, unfortunately, that the things that Dr. G. Woodson was talking about in 1933 are still here, breathing and living and growing in 2025. So what I mean by that is this. There is absolutely a divide between quote unquote educated, and I'm going to clarify what I mean, the so-called educated black people and the masses of black people. Now, when I say that, I want to be clear. Nobody is saying that education is not important because I'm a firm believer in education, whether it's in academia or whether it's education that happens after you leave school or your everyday education. I believe that. The issue is when you make that degree instead of a badge of honor, you make it sort of like a soapbox to condescend to everybody else, which is what happens with a lot of people in those circles. You end up removing yourself from the masses of people and you end up creating a lot of animosity for yourself, not because you're educated, it's because you're arrogant. Now, I don't know the native. I want to be very, very specific about what I say. There have always been people who are black and educated who have gone through the academy who've been able to come back and help the community or also respect the community. What we have now is this sort of pundit class of people who are very insular. They're in the same group chats. I know that's because I used to be in one. I used to be in it until I made them mad and they got me out of it. But that's a whole other conversation where everybody sort of reinforces everybody's talking points and they also reinforce each other's classism. And if you come from outside of that, they have the same attitudes about you that somebody who you would think would be on the opposite political side of them have. And I think that's what we're seeing right now. And I think it's a good thing that people are seeing this because people need to be aware of it because it's something that's very dangerous that needs to be checked.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. I think you are absolutely right. I think it is dangerous, and I've been in some of those spots and places as well. Hell, I think we've been in some together before, and and I'm one of those people that you came and worked with. Like you got to see where I grew up, where I came from, and we really wanted to connect on that space. I just, it just felt really elitist, man. Like it's just like I don't understand. I just when you look at the success, I mean, Joe Budden's podcast may be the most successful black podcast that's not a streamer. So that's not Kaiser or whatever the case is. Like it really is this place that's and is catching all these different type of black men and women, and Mark was an incredible addition to that because you have Mark Lamont Hills in barbershops, and you have Issues, and you have Queen's Flips, and Mona, like the new sister that just joined, who's very, very Philly. You know what I'm saying? And I just feel like it just the dismissal. Like I don't even feel like they really interacted with what actually happened in context to what that show is and how it plays out. It just I didn't like it, bro. I did not like it, man. And it just you didn't even have to mention that. You didn't have to mention it at all. But I think that their show is getting a lot more views than they had because there's a lot of JBP watchers that I just went and looked back at the video. All the comments, bro. I'm not lying. The first 40 comments I was looking at like 10 minutes before we started recording, it was all JBP people, bro. Like getting on their heads. So, I just I know you had a strong thought about what was your first thought when you saw it though? Because I know this is like a steak to a lion, bro. Like I just know you saw it and was like, oh, I'm about to have a field day with this. I just want to know what Torrance's first thought was when he heard this.
Honestly, man, my first thought when I heard it was that I'm glad that Joe Budden is being aggressive about pushing back against that because like I said before, what happens in a lot of these situations is these quote unquote talented tenth, or what I like to call the inheritors of the talented tenth, because a lot of them aren't that talented, but they have a lot of access and they have a lot of connections. What they feel like is they have been the appointed and designated spokesperson for black people. I call them Negro whisperers. I call them academics. And these are the people who feel like by the grace of God and their degrees and PhDs that they have been ordained to speak for everybody else. And if you're not in that clique with them and you're not on that educational level, then you need to shut up, be quiet, and just don't question your elders and your betters. So I think what's happening is this. There's two things that are happening. And I said this earlier this morning. Those people who I mentioned, they don't control the mic anymore. They have been able to control the conversation for a very long time. They've been able to lead a lot of the black political conversations and black social conversations for a very long time, but they've worn out their welcome with people. They've worn out their welcome first with black people who are middle class and maybe working class and poor who don't want to be condescended to anymore. And through the grace of social media, they've been able to find their voice. And most importantly, they've worn out their welcome with white liberals who are their benefactors. This last election was a rude awakening for a lot of them people. They have always been able to deliver either black social clout or goodwill, and most importantly, black votes. And it didn't happen for them in 2024. So a lot of those purses have closed up, and a lot of these people are trying to either come back home or they're trying to stand, which is really what they're doing. They're trying to stand in their arrogance and their elitism and condescension, but they're on an island by themselves, and the world has moved past them. Like you said, Joe Budden has the number one podcast, urban podcast in the country. Joe Budden has a seven. Joe Budden, the JBP has been valued at like a seven figures. I think he just did that $20 million deal. I forgot whether it was Sirius or Spotify, whoever it was, like that. While the people who are in these elitist intellectual circles can barely get their family to call up and listen to them and stuff. So who's the fool in this situation? Who's really arrogant?
There was a leak, right? Like he accidentally leaked. I think he made like 1 million a month or something like that. It was a crazy number. It was a number of like, oh, this brother is really, really successful. And look, he did it his own way. He took a lot of criticism along the way and doing it his own way. And again, there could have been some type of different type of connection. I think if I don't know, man. I would say it probably would have behooved them to want to be in conversation in a different way, and Mark could have bridged that gap. But I don't know if that's what they were going after. I think that by saying, look, they could have called Mark. They all know him. They could have talked to him on the phone. Like if I'm your friend, Torrin, and me and you are friends, and let's say you go do a pod with some people I don't rock with, but you doing good over there. I'm not being a good friend to you if I put you in a tough situation, where you got to like deal with me, and now you got to also deal with the pod that you're working on, because now they probably looking at you funny, like, wait, did your friend just bomb on us? Like they couldn't call you and say, man, why don't you come on home? And that's the other thing too. Mark Lamont Hill is about his bread. I don't think native, I don't think the Native Land podcast got $5 for Mark. You know what I'm saying? Versus what he's getting over at the JBP. It just felt performative. And this is the thing. I respect Angela Rye. I know a lot of people don't like her. Like I've listened to her for a long time. I don't agree with everything. I don't know if Tiffany Cross would like me at all. I think she's a smart sister. First off, they are two beautiful, really smart people. But it's also like when you hear them, it's like, damn, if I don't think exactly like you, or if I am a black straight man and I operate and I walk through this world in that type of way without being overly intellectual or overly liberal or things like that, it does feel like there may be a level of dismissal. I don't want to put that on those ladies' jacket, but I know the ilk. So I'm not saying about them, but I know people like them, and I know that they don't really like dudes. Like they don't really like I don't know. I don't want this to come off the wrong way. I want to be careful with my words, Torrin, because I'm gonna let you just have it and go at it, because I don't want to disparage them. I think that they are really, really smart. I just don't think that most of the people that I know and care about, like I think if you were on that podcast and you're one of the smartest, calmest people that I know, but once you start talking the way you talk, I just think they would summarily dismiss you. That's my thinking, though. What do you think?
Well, I've actually been in that situation for real before. I've been on news shows where I'll have a sister introduce me, and before I even open my mouth, they'll tell the audience, "Get ready." Like I'm finna come in there and start yelling like that dude with the ponytail that went viral with the thing talking about, I don't want what you think. Like I'm gonna come in there and wild out like that. I'm like, I'm coming in just to get my point of view. I'm reading up the survival scroll. You know that viral I do like that.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm finna come and be chill and give my points. But no, I agree with you. And like I said, I don't know Bakari Sellers. I've never met Angela Rye or Tiffany Cross. So I don't know them enough to say that I don't like them or not. But what I don't like, and I'll say this, I don't like some of the positions they take, and I don't like some of the condescension they give and the double talk that they give sometimes when they're talking about black issues, or they're talking about black people who are not quote unquote on their level. But then you want to get out here and get on CNN and you want to do this pro-black thing. And Joe Budden mentioned that. He's like, he has an issue with people who do the pro-black fist in the air on one side, but then you're going to tell me you don't get away from them dudes over there. I think that absolutely is a situation, and I think that is a mentality in a lot of those circles. Because like you said earlier, and I said before, I've been in those circles, and I've heard the way some of these people who consider themselves privileged or elitists talk about other black people. And really, if it wasn't for the black verbiage and cadence, you would think you're at a Young Republicans meeting. And I hate to say that, but it's the truth. It's just the truth. And we have to address that because we don't like to talk about classism and elitism in the black community and in black certain, especially in black media circles. But this is a thing. But I think what happens is like you said, it would have been excellent if they could have had some sort of call to action or some sort of call of Jesus meeting on the phone instead of getting on their podcast and doing this. But when you were an elitist and you had this arrogant mentality, this is where that drives you to do to feel like you should be able to say whatever's on your mind. You should be able to put it out there in front of the world to hear, and the world is supposed to agree with you. Now, what's happening is that they're realizing, which they should have 2 or 3 years ago, that the world is not agreeing with this stuff anymore, and quite frankly, they're tired of it. Joe Budden's podcast is popular because there's a lot more people who want to hear plain speaking, like Malcolm X said, make it plain. And they want to have a lot of back and forth with people who are intelligent, maybe not intelligent in the way that the academy says you're intelligent, but those brothers are intelligent enough to get an audience big enough to listen to everything they have to say. And people, let's not forget, Mark was brought over there. Remember? Mark went over there because he wanted to be over there. Why? Because, like you said, he's about his bread. And why is he about his bread? Because he knew there's an audience of 7 million people who will tune in to hear everything he has to say, like with everybody else. So if you're going to be intelligent, you're going to be elitist. Wouldn't it make sense to listen to the people who have an elite podcast and been able to build that from nothing?
So just what we were talking about, I got two questions for you, and I'm gonna set them up real quick. And they're about both intellectualism and the boule. I've been struggling, and this is probably terrible practice, but you're my journalism friend, my journalist friend. You'll be able to navigate through it. I've really wondered, like, I've wrestled with this for years, and I just want your take. What even is an intellectual? Like seriously, like the word, like when people say it, because depending on who you ask, you'll get a different answer. Like some people will tell you an intellectual is somebody with advanced degrees, someone who reads the canon, somebody that could quote Foucault and Dubois and bell hooks from memory. And I know how you feel about Bell, but I can quote all three of those people. Others will tell you that intellectual is someone who thinks critically about the world, regardless of their credential, somebody who asks hard questions, someone who challenges power. I'm dovetailing that too, because as you kind of explain your version of intellectual to the audience, I also want to throw in if you can kind of talk about the boule. Because when people throw that word around and say it, I think this is one of the clearer examples in pop culture of like boule activity. So I could be wrong on that front, but the floor is yours. Handle both of those however you will.
Okay. I know, I don't want to take up too much time, but I want to try to give
So
my.
I set you up so you can go off as much as you want it.
All right. Okay. So I'm going to do it. Intellectual. Well, we could start with the cultural definition of intellectual, what the public thinks an intellectual is. An intellectual is somebody who is based in the academy, meaning they're either a professor or they're a doctor or they're a PhD who's in the academy, mostly in the humanities, but it could be anywhere. But mostly they deal with history, philosophy, art, that sort of thing. That's somebody, in my opinion, an intellectual on that level is somebody who's actually a full-time intellectual. Somebody like a Dr. Cornel West, or somebody like a Dr. Sandy Darity, or somebody like that, or a Dr. Tommy Curry. Shout out to Dr. Tommy Curry. People who actually make their living and they build their work within the academy, and that's their full-time 24/7 job. It's like they're in the academy, they do speaking tours because all their work is connected to an academic branch. Now, that's the textbook definition of what the public thinks of an intellectual. The old stereotype of somebody surrounded by a million books with a checkered jacket on with a patch smoking a pipe and everything like that sort of thing. That's the public idea.
It can't be my chain and my black men speak freely shirt and my Wayans Brothers hat. I don't.
I'm getting ready to go there. Now, in the real world, outside of the academy, an intellectual, in my opinion, is somebody who can bring new enlightenment or enlighten people about whether it's their living conditions, whether it's their material conditions, or whether it's their life in general. And that can be a brother like you with my shout out to my black man speak freely shirt on, your hat, your gold chain on. It could be a brother in the system. It could be a brother like the brother that schooled Malcolm in the Malcolm X movie. It could be anybody. It could be a homeless person who's had an experience, who knows how enough to tell you don't go down that street that time of night. That's what an intellectual is. I've had intellectual conversations with brothers on the street. I've had intellectual conversations with brothers who were doing years. I've had intellectual conversations who are poor and working class. An intellectual is anybody who can impart some sort of wisdom to your life that will help
Okay.
benefit your life, either intellectually or just practically. Now, having said that, those two definitions of intellectual are about as far apart as one side of the Grand Canyon as the other,
Mm,
unfortunately. Now, ironically, a lot of times, especially when we're talking about black intellectuals, It's brothers who I just mentioned, the brothers who are working class, the brothers who are the uncles, the brothers who are never going to see the inside of Harvard. Those are the people, and that wisdom that was imparted in them gave them the drive and gave them the tools they needed to get into classic intellectualism. And there used to not be a divide between one and the other, but in the past 30 years, I'd say 30 to 40 years, that wide has gotten cavernous. And that divide is what you're seeing in the disconnect between Angela Rye and Tiffany Cross and Joe Budden right now. You feel what I'm saying? So I'm
Mhm.
saying, in my opinion, I think intellectualism and intelligence can come from anywhere. It can come from the academy. It can come from that brother on the street. But society, and especially black society, has told us that we have to have the division between one and the other, and you should only listen to one and to completely disregard the other is just either hotep or, like Bakari said, barbershop talk. And that's, I think, is really doing people a disservice because we don't have enough intellectual curiosity. Unfortunately, people are gonna get mad, but it's the truth. And we don't have enough intellectual diversity and enough space to be able to discard one for the other. And I think a
Mhm.
lot of people in the academy have discarded the other. And now that the academy is really giving them they behind the kiss. I'm saying this because I don't know the rules of your platform. Now that the academy,
Oh, you good. You can you it's mine.
okay,
Do what
all right,
you do.
okay, cool, all right. Well, I'm going to do it then. Now that the academy has given the so-called elite black academics their ass to kiss, now they're scrambling trying to figure out where to go, and they burn so many bridges that they ain't got nowhere to go.
Okay. All right. Well, and I think no, I think that was a really, really clear answer. I still don't know exactly where I fall, but I think that but no, I do. I get it, man. I think because these words get thrown around, and I think Joe would argue and say, how y'all smarter than me, but I'm the number one platform. Like how y'all so smart, but you're not cutting or making any inroads. All your fans are people that already like you, people that already think like you. Like we go viral every day. Like this, listen, man. People can say what they want about Joe Budden. People can say what they want about Stephen A. Smith. People can say what they want about these people. Even Candace Owens. You know what all three of them got in common? They are viral every single week. They are the topic of conversation every single week. Either you hate them or you love them, but you feel something. And I think that like those people garner attention in a certain type of way where, like you said, they not letting you dismiss them anymore because they don't fit whatever box. Like people keep telling Stephen A. Smith he's not a politician. I don't take my political cues from any celebrity. You know what I'm saying? But he's still talking it and he making more money doing it. And he just got a new show doing it, right? Like, so I just was looking at that before I lose it. Another thing that comes up is this whole boule thing. Does this reek of boule to you? And one, explain to the people what boule is, but then I really would love for you to just go if this kind of feels like they're part of boule or not, and why or why not. I'm just curious from your perspective.
I'm actually glad you asked that question because I think we do need to get some clarity about that. First, I want to say that the boule is actually a thing. I don't have the exact name of the fraternity, but there is a fraternity. I know it starts with Sigma, but I don't have the full thing in front of me right now. That actually does call themselves the Boule, and what that is basically a black fraternity, a black Greek society, but it's mostly made up of people who are consider themselves the intellectuals. You know, the people like I mentioned earlier, the people who have matriculated through the academy and they've reached a certain plateau either in the academy or in their jobs or whatever they do. And a lot of people in that particular fraternity tend to be connected to either politics or media or finance and things like that.
Sigma Pi Phi.
That's it. That's it. That's it.
It says the origin of the word boule depends on the context as it can refer to an ancient Greek council, the Sigma Pi Phi fraternity, also called the boule, a round loaf of bread or a type of wooden lumber. I think we're going to go at the first one.
Yeah, exactly. So it is a thing that really exists. And I think it's good that we give people that context because I think with a lot of black people, the boule takes on the same sort of mentality as the Illuminati with the tinfoil hats and everything. So we got to be clear about what we're talking about. Now, having said that, now that we've established that that's a thing, there is a mentality around that that's become fallen under the umbrella term of the boule. And basically what it means is this sort of like elitism, a level of colorism, and a level of arrogance from people who are not in their circle which is basically the unwashed masses in the way a lot of them feel, a lot of the way a lot of them think. I'm saying this and I'm trying to be very cautious with my words too, because I know several brothers who were actually in the Boule for real. And a lot of those brothers in there are actually really cool brothers. A lot of them are really, really chill. We've had really good conversations about certain stuff. The issue comes in when you're dealing with people who fall under the umbrella of the Boule, which is not the fraternity itself, but the mentality around that kind of gets considered the Boule. These are people who are wealthy, who are successful, who have been able to reach certain plateaus, like I said, in their positions and everything. But what that has done is sort of given them the idea that they need to take on the mantle of W.B. Du Bois' talented 10th, which is another thing I need to get into because that's another thing that gets twisted up. Because the idea of the talented 10th, as it was,
He abandoned it later on in life, by the way. But yeah,
yeah, exactly. But the original idea of the talented 10th was supposed to be the top 10% of black people who have achieved financial success, educational success, and political success. And what they were supposed to do was take what they've learned from being in the system and succeeding in the system and go back to their communities and help bring up the 90% of people who were not able to get into those spaces and bring them up so we can all have a community that's all educated and looks out for each other. What had happened was the people who were able to do that basically said, we are the 10%, we're the elite, and the hell with them Negroes down there, let them figure it out. That's what happened. That was not the original goal of the whole idea of a talent attempt. It was supposed to be a vanguard that would come back and uplift everybody else. And this ties into something that Malcolm X said. And it's all connected. I know I'm going down a bunch of roads, but I'm going to get us on the highway. Trust me.
also, I do this in your lives. For y'all that please follow Torraine Walker on Twitter. It is it's an interesting good time. Love him or hate him. And then go to one of his spaces. And he's so kind as he lets me speak over there sometimes, and I never can quite land the plane. I just go on and on. So you go as long as you want to, brother. I got you.
All right. So I appreciate it. What happened was in 1964, and I say this a lot. Some people get what I'm saying, some people don't, but it is what it is. In 1964, the minute that the ink was dry on the civil rights bill that Martin Luther King and other civil rights leaders had negotiated with the Johnson administration, the so-called talented 10th, who could and could afford to, pulled up stakes and got as far away from black people as they could without leaving the country. That means moving into their own enclaves, moving next to people who would have called the police on them and sick dogs on them a week before that ink was dry on that machine, on that paper, and tried to low over there and say that we are the elite and we deserve to be in this country away from everybody else, just like y'all. That's the mentality that still permeates a lot of these places that people call the boule. And you do hear people who are in those circles still talk like that, where like, if you didn't go to this school, if you didn't pledge this fraternity, if you didn't go to this school, if you didn't go to this job, if you didn't do this, then you need to be quiet. You need to listen to what we say because we're the people who are going to lead you out of the darkness. When, like you said, even in the late 60s, Martin Luther King said, I may have led my people into a burning house. Even though Martin Luther King was not technically boule, his upbringing and the way he moved into those circles would have put him right square in that position. You know what I mean? And honestly, people who were in that world probably would have told him, don't go out there and stir up trouble and stuff because that's the mentality they had. It was a go along to get along mentality. We're over here. We're going to take care of our own, and everybody else just got to fend for themselves. And that mentality, unfortunately, still permeates a lot of people who are classic academics or intellectuals, or people who aren't even intellectuals. They're just able to get a job they would get a good job and think they're hopping Bob all of a sudden because you see that a lot too.
Man, I just appreciate you saying that. And just as we're thinking about it, well, before I go to my little point, my soliloquy in this, how do you feel that the Native Land Pod falls into that? Do you feel like they are falling into that boule camp, or kind of, a version of that? Like, do you think they see themselves as such? I'm just curious because, like, again, I know you've dealt with people in a very similar way, and I just knew that you were just licking your chops when you heard them. So, how would you characterize that pod?
They absolutely fall into the umbrella boule camp because if you look at who's over there, Angela Rye, Tiffany Cross, Andrew Gillum, all these people basically are microcosms of everything I said. You're dealing with a lawyer, you're dealing with a politician, you're dealing with somebody who was in media, broadcast media. You know what I mean? You're dealing with people who were lobbyists and stuff like that. And those are all the places politically where black people who are in that circle come from. And I'm gonna be honest with you, literally, and Up until this whole Joe Budden thing, I had never heard of that podcast until this morning. To be frank with you, I knew I heard about a year ago that they were doing a podcast, but I've never heard an episode of it. But I'm saying that what they're doing is their audience is the exact same people I'm talking about. They're basically preaching to the choir. They're preaching liberal establishment Democrat politics. Establishment. It's basically establishment radio for the establishment that nobody else wants to hear because they've already been burnt out on it. So yeah,
It feels like there's a secret coda that they follow. And
it's so secret that nobody heard about it.
right. But it's like, but it's like where if I know your answer before you give it, that's what I mean, right? Where it's like, I know where you stand on who should be president. And again, that's not really a good one, but I know where you stand on this issue. I know where you stand on that issue. And I know that these are the black sellouts. And we agree that these are the black sellouts. And that's why I think it was so easy for them to turn their nose up. I just appreciate you saying all that, Torraine, because here's my truth, right? I grew up in North Oakland, 54th and Gaskill to be exact. Born out here just outside of Chicago, out west in Maywood, lived in Paducah, Kentucky. I've lived in all these places, broke, poor, whatever. But North Oakland, I mean, that's where I learned how to move, how I learned how to survive, how to read a room. It shaped me. That's in my bones. And then I went and got degrees. And I learned I don't like the term code switch. I learned strategy and survival. And like there are just certain times where certain things work and certain times where other things don't. And just how to navigate these predominant like institutions, these predominantly white, but now these kind of black elite spaces as well. And the funny thing is, you got to move almost the same way. And as you do in these predominantly white institutions, you have to move a similar way in these ones that's supposed to be built for black people. And it taught me there's a language that you have to speak to the academy, and I hated that language. Like I just told you that I submitted something to an academic journal. It may not get accepted because I don't follow those rules. For instance, I'm not going to talk to white people as the dominant class. Listen, I think the way that we speak in academia, I'd be like, if I was a white person, how could I not feel entitled? Like, how could I not feel superior? Because everything that we write about is about them being superior and like this underclass that's trying to come up and do X, Y, and Z, right? And when you write it like that, you subconsciously are putting in these white people's head that we're the only ones who can fix this country. We're the only ones who can fix this problem. We're the only ones who can fix education. And so I just been in these spaces and I'm like, why are we parroting that same stuff? If it's supposed to be the black, like people, if it's supposed to be those people that have attained and have this level of access, isn't it time for us to be doing things that help other black people and not just the ones we like? Aren't we supposed to be building things that where we can listen? Me and the Queen's Flip probably wouldn't get along all the time either. You get what I'm saying? Like he got a lot going on, and everybody knows that guy in their neighborhood, but he's important to that community. He matters, and for what it's worth, not for nothing, he probably make more bread than that whole podcast by itself as well too, right? Like he's a hustler. He knows how to get to the bag. All I'm saying is, I know what it feels like to not necessarily fit anywhere. Like I'm not hood enough. I'm not going to be hood enough for the hood people. I'm probably not going to be intellectual enough for the other intellectuals. But the one thing about living in all those places that works for me is that I'm used to rocking alone. Like you've seen me be like, yo, I don't know if this is working. Let me just go do my thing. Or like, yo, try to bring people along and do it humbly, but not have judgment in my heart for people. Because it's one thing to be like, that podcast ain't my cup of tea. But to just summarily dismiss the existence of those other men in that podcast is crazy. And you know how I know it's crazy? Because if you do it the other way, you're going to hear about how we're sexist. You're going to hear about how people hate a certain demographic. You're going to hear about toxic masculinity. You're going to hear these things if the exact same thing was also by black people, was done aimed at the native land pod. Here's what I do like about that pod. I like that Andrew Gillum got a second chance. Because let me tell you, what Andrew Gillum went through and came back from, I don't know if everybody can make it back from that. And here's the other thing. Ain't neither one of us talking or tripping off of that. Hey, Andrew, do your thing. You were the mayor of a place. You had some good ideas. They caught you up in some shit. You dust yourself off. You keep it moving. your personal life is your personal life. And if people can show that type of grace, that type of love there. And to be fair, Andrew and Bakari on some level too, they kind of were sympathetic to the JBP. I don't know if you listened to the whole episode. Like they kind of let me shoot them some bail. They let their castmates go. But then as brothers, they kind of were like, basically how I heard it was like, but I'm a black man. Like I've been in these spaces. Like these spaces happen and it's an authentic space. And Mark is well equipped. This is what Bakari and Andrew said. We trust Mark. Mark knows what he's doing. He's really smart. He's really him for a reason. And like he knows how to handle himself in those spaces. He knows when the situation calls for what it needs to call for. And so I know I'm kind of ranting, but I don't want to be unfair to either podcast. I don't want to be unfair to the ladies or whatever, but I just know, inside of my bones, if the Joe Budden podcast came at that pod in the same way, there would be so many think pieces today. There would be so many black men hate black women texts today. There would be so many of these things. And we have to have this conversation. But as my friend and journalist Torraine Walker says, them people ain't got the microphone like they think they do anymore.
Yep. And to be frank with you, they don't have the microphone because of their own fault and their own hubris and arrogance. Now, I do want to say a couple of things too. I think some of this chatter, because I ain't gonna lie, when I saw the altercation between Mark and Flip, it kind of tripped me out because I was kind of laughing at it because it's like I thought they brought him over here to be able to bring some intellectual vibes, but you're still dealing with men, and men gonna bump heads. You know what I mean? And
Absolutely.
I think what we're dealing with is people. I'm talking about some of the outside chatter now. Some people who aren't familiar with Black culture, and most importantly, aren't familiar with the way brothers get down. Sometimes it may have looked like it was one thing when it's something totally different. Me and one of my best friends, man, one of my best friends who I've known for 30 years, me and that dude don't agree on damn near nothing outside of what we're going to get to eat when we get together. We have had some yelling arguments and stuff like that. So where if you don't know us, you think we about to come to blows, but that's still my dude. And black men do that, and then we sit back down and we get everything together. A good example of that is the picture, because I like to use movie analogies. The scene in Lean on Me when Morgan Freeman and Robert Guillaume was about to go at it and yell at each other, yelling and screaming and everything, and they couldn't come to.
I am the head nigga in charge. Yeah.
Yeah. And then when they finish, come on, let's go get something to eat. That's how we doing stuff. You know what I mean? Sometimes. Not everybody moves like that. But if you don't know the culture, you think it's two men about to fight and everything. And it could have went that way, but you had other brothers in there to make everybody sit down and calm down. That just happens sometimes. And if you don't know the culture and you already have a preconceived idea about the culture, especially when you're dealing with black men, people are going to see it one way when it's something totally different. You know what I mean? And if you don't know that, then you end up with some of the commentary you get. And I don't know, like I said, I don't know too much about Angela. I'm not staying on them. I'm just saying them because they've been driving this.
I understand.
I don't know too much about Angela Yee's background or even Tiffany Cross's background.
Angela Yee was formerly of the Breakfast Club. And Rye.
I mean, I'm sorry. Lord forgive me.
They did that on the JBP too.
Which
shout out to Angela Yee and to Angela Rye, who neither one of them know me or respond to this, but respect for both of them.
We go to show you, who's got more brand recognition. But anyway, I'm just saying, if I don't know what Angela Rye, Tiffany Cross grew up, but if you know the culture, then you know the cues of the culture and know what to do and stuff. Like I say, there's all these little things that if you don't know what's going on and you haven't been around that and you haven't been steeped in it, you're not going to go and you're not going to understand. It's no different than a black man and a black woman who are a couple who are about to go into a club and both of them get a vibe and they look at each other and turn around and go back in their cars. Some things are unspoken, you know what I mean? It's just some stuff you don't know. But I'm giving you all that to say this. There is a way to have these conversations without it devolving into this classism and elitism, and also this anti-blackness, Andrew, because like you said, if it was a group of black women and it had been flipped, absolutely, this would have been all over the world, man. You would have had about 4 or 5 published articles and about 13 different talk show appearances about this stuff. So if you want the same level of grace and you want the same level of respect when somebody's either same gender loving or they're a woman or they're a black woman, extend that same grace to the other half of your community, these brothers over here. Because what's wrong with them being able to feel how they feel, and you can, and that's supposed to be wrong, but you're not wrong to feel how you feel. We got to be able to be human beings and be adults.
Absolutely. And they always say brothers don't show how they feel. We show how we feel, just not in the way that you want us to show. Like that's how that in that moment, that was two men showing you exactly how they feel in the moment. And everything calmed down. And they did have that moment immediately after, right? The come on, let's go get something to eat, right? Like we're good. And they both came out and addressed it like adults and dealt with what they need to deal with. But you led into something, and I'm glad you led here. This is how I know we got a good episode. I've noticed in a lot of these intellectual spaces, there's just one of two things are happening. Either people have completely forgotten where they came from or where their families came from, or you meeting somebody who discovered their blackness in college and now they're overplaying it and performing it. They don't know the social mores. So when they try to play that, it just doesn't land. It lands with a thud. Or they came up very wealthy and they came up kind of segregated from everyday barbershop black people. And then they took some college classes, some Afrocentric classes, or whatever the case is. And now they have to make up for lost time. They have to perform their brand of blackness. Like, so they don't know some of those unwritten rules that you just talked about. They don't know that, on the back end, this has already kind of gotten squashed. And listen, Joe Budden is smart. He edits that thing. He could have absolutely taken that out. He's the number one podcast because he knows what to take out and what to keep in. So let me break down that second type of the performing, right? Because I do think it's important. Like there's just a specific kind of person you meet in intellectual black spaces, somebody who grew up disconnected from black culture, went to college, took the Africana studies classes, and suddenly became the authority on what it means to be black. See, here's the thing. I have no issue with you finding yourself in college. That's what college is for. But don't you live one type of way, take some classes, and now you coming back to a place that you weren't really active in before and start preaching to people and telling them what it means to be black. Like I don't have to do that. And I think that's what these spaces tend to feel like for me. Like and now they're overcompensating. Like the type. They will quote Malcolm, but they can't tell you what block that Malcolm grew up on. They don't know nothing about Detroit Red. They'll talk about the community, but they haven't set foot in one in years, if ever. They are scared of the hood. They cannot go and do all that shit they do on those shows. And I'm not talking about the people on native land because I don't know them. I'm talking about people I know now. Because I do speaking tours and I go into black churches. That's my top circuit and I do it for free. How you speak in that black church to black church going people, mostly women, grandmamas and mamas, is so different than how you talking on these podcasts or how you talk on MSNBC or CNN. And they speak with this performative militancy, this like overly rehearsed radicalism that just feels hollow because they're not about to swing on nothing. Ain't nothing about to happen. It just wasn't earned through living. They kind of built up their identity through reading, and they've read a lot. But you can read as much Foucault or as much Bell Hooks, or you can read as much about these people, Angela Davis. You can read about them all you want. But to live their life, or you're not going to be able to absorb that by osmosis. And for me, it's really easy to tell when I'm in the presence of those people. I don't know if that's a thing for you, but I'm going to go into my next question for you. Like, because you work in brand curation and you help people find their authentic voices. So when you're working with clients or organizations, like, how do you distinguish between authentic messaging and performance? Like, what are the tells for you?
Well, I'll tell you exactly what I tell clients when they want to work with me. What I do is the first thing I'm going to do is have a conversation with you, because I think what happens is a lot of people, and it's not just the things you mentioned, I think it's just something that's unfortunately very, very prevalent in American culture. Everybody feels like they got to perform, and everybody is walking around like they got a camera crew following them everywhere they go. I saw this when the first time I saw this was in LA. But this is something that's really prevalent, not just in that culture, but something that's very prevalent all over the country. Atlanta's got it too, but a lot of places have that where everybody feels like they have to be putting on a front or they have to perform for people who aren't even looking at them. So what I tell people is, look, just be you. Let's find the things about you that are authentic and are going to resonate with people, and then we'll build on that. But what happens is in the spaces you're talking about, you absolutely have people who have never really seen a hood before, who don't know what that feels like to try to make a syrup sandwich and try to go around the house scraping together nickels and quarters for the bus pass. Not saying that you automatically have to do that to make you authentic. I'm just saying that there is a level of Black experience that people who are completely removed from that level of Black experience, who want to come back and try to tell other people to do that, and you don't have to do that. It's like, I guess the best description I could think of that, man, is like, you got some white women who like some white women feel like they gotta put braids in their hair and come around and be like, "What's up, bro?" and talk cuz and all like that to try to get somebody to like you. Why don't you just be a white girl and just find your brother you like? It's the same thing. You're gonna have the same effect. You're gonna get the same effect, but one is gonna be more authentic than the other. And a lot of people who do the same stuff are doing the exact same sort of cosplay. It's like, you ain't gotta do that. If you came from a cul-de-sac, it's okay if you came from a cul-de-sac.
It's a beautiful thing. Celebrate your parents setting you up for success.
Exactly. It ain't nothing wrong with that. It is absolutely nothing wrong with that. If you came from that, go ahead and own that and acknowledge that. Just do that. And that doesn't mean you can't learn. That doesn't mean you got to be afraid to come around people on the block. Because here's the thing too. There's pros and cons to both of that. There's pros and cons to growing up wealthy in a cul-de-sac, just like there's pros and cons to growing up in the hood with a sheet up over your window because you can't afford blinds. There's gifts and there's strengths and weaknesses in both of those, and there's no reason to cosplay one or the other if you can do both, if you can find some sort of strength in that. You know what I mean? But this society tells people you got to be something else, and if you come from this place, you ain't real, or if you come from here, you got to be you got to be real till you die, till it takes you into the pen. Like I said, there's pros and cons to all of this. But the main thing is, who are you? Who are you going to be? Who are you going to take into the room with you when you go into a room? Are you going to take in an act? Are you going to put on a mask? Or are you going to be you with your experience and your expertise? It's okay. It's easy to do that. It's okay to be the goofy nerdy dude as long as that's who you are. It's okay to be the hood dude who's been in and out of the system if you've been able to grow from that and become an intelligent person. Because it's ironic, you talking about these people who grew up in the cul-de-sac who quote Malcolm X, and they forget that Malcolm did 6 years in the pen and stuff and was a dope man and a pimp and did all this other stuff that got him to that point. He had to let all of that go and then take those experiences that he learned from being on the
It was
streets in
6
Boston and
years?
Harlem.
I know he was in the pen. I didn't know it was that long. I know he was in the pen. I did not know it was that long.
He did 6 years. He had a 12-year sentence for them burglaries he was doing in Boston with shorting them two white girls. He had 6 years. I think he got out like in 4.5 or something like that. But yeah, he was looking at some long years. You see what I'm saying? But he had to go through all that to get to become the person he was. And the people who were quoting him, who you mentioned, but dropped dead at the first sign of a police car riding by. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, man. This whole thing and this notion, that's what I want people to take something away from this. And the thing is, if you Black, regardless of if you were the cul-de-sac kid or the shelter kid, like, you still matter, man. You still can be dope. And you don't have to play into this stuff. You don't have to be part of this, like, this unwritten code that I don't think is pushing us forward. I think it's pushing a few people forward, but it's just the dismissiveness, man. Like, look, I am proud individually of the people on both podcasts, but especially the Native Land podcast. These are really accomplished people. I don't know these people personally, so I don't want it to seem like I'm shitting on people that are accomplished, that actually do speak up and do the things that they believe and all that stuff. Because I'm not. I actually think it's dope. I don't have to agree with you. Listen, I can't. I don't watch MSNBC no more. I don't watch Fox either. Like, and CNN ain't that great to me either, right? At this point, because nobody's just giving the news, but it feels like everybody's playing their role. I know what the Fox people are gonna say before they say it. I know what the MSNBC people are going to say when they say it. And I know that CNN is going to just split the table in half and they're going to do the same thing. They're just going to have both people doing it. So I just, when you work in brand curation, I just feel like that was an important lesson that you just gave. Be you. You're the only you in the universe. You are a hot commodity if you can trust it and trust yourself. I just want to, I said that the podcast kind of came off as being too good, man. The last thing I think I just want to kind of get to is like just the irony, though. The irony of how this happened. These are scholars. These are people that are supposed to be intellectually above, like, because the way they turn their nose up. Torraine, how is it that nobody watched that full show before they did that assault? How? It's rule number one. How? Like, not one? Nobody?
You want my professional analysis?
I want give both. Let's I want to have some fun with this. I really want to know.
All right. So I'm gonna give you the meat first, and then I'm gonna give you the meat, and then I'm gonna hit you with the bones. Professionally, they just don't have an appealing product because I'm talking about the Native Land podcast, and this is no disrespect to them. I'm just giving you the same analysis I would give anybody else if they asked me my opinion.
Oh, listen, and I got shows that don't nobody watch. I understand. It's okay. It should be
Yeah,
okay. I got stuff that don't nobody watch, and I think it's brilliant. So
yeah, it happens like that. You know what I mean? But here's the thing: they that crew, because from the individual hosts to the topics to even the people who are connected to it, it is so connected to a political system that has burned so many people that people are rejecting that because they feel they're almost like an avatar of the system and the political party that really pissed them off and gave them the same sort of condescension. So people are like, "Oh, they over there talking. Oh, they've been talking. I've been seeing y'all talking crap on MSNBC for the past 2.5 years. I don't want to hear none of that. I can hear that anywhere." So that's the one part of it. This other part of it is that level of condescension outside of what they represent. People are just tired of it. You can't intimidate people with your degrees no more. Nobody don't give a damn. You can't intimidate people by the fact you've been on MSNBC. All you need is a damn cell phone and a mic, and I can be MSNBC. So what does that mean to me? Nobody cares. That's the other part of it. On the flip side of it, Joe Budden has the ear of the people. And I don't care what nobody says, whether you love it, hate it, like it, dislike it. If you have the ear of the people and the people will rock with you and tune into you, nobody can beat that. You know what I mean? You can say what you want about Kevin Samuels, but Kevin Samuels had 500,000 people tune in every time he went live. I remember when people was turning off the TV to go listen to Kevin Samuels, whether they liked to hear what he had to say or just mad about what he was going to say. That's the kind of buzz Joe Budden had. And on top of that, it's successful. And ironically, the mainstream media acknowledges Joe Budden's success. Like I said, his show's been valuated at like what, $20 million or something like that. So you can't beat that. Nobody wants to hear. Nobody wants to hear. Nobody wants to hear hall monitors yelling at them and telling them that if you don't vote this way, then you're a sucker and you're a sellout, and yelling at the same people that you know they're going to talk about. It just doesn't work anymore. That's part of it. They don't have the ear of the people anymore because they're disconnected from the people. And the people are with Joe Budden, and ain't nothing they can do about it. They can get mad. They can be mad all they want. But the funny thing about it is, all these intellectuals used battle rap, gutter hip hop tactic to get views and everything. They talk noise about the hottest guy running, just the same way that 50 Cent did when he was talking about Ja Rule. They started taking shots at the dude who was on top to get views, and look what happened. Like you said, people who ain't never paid attention to that podcast before, from Joe Budden, are going over there to listen to hear what they're talking about. They're gonna get a little bit of a spike and a bump can they sustain it?
yeah, but they was getting their asses lit up, boy. I went over. They was lighting. It was humble pie being served over there. And I mean, you know this from like, and listen, I caught a lot of flack in the years leading up to the last election and during and after the election. You've been in rooms, people. I've had these conversations with people I love and people I don't know, just about the mistakes that I saw my party, the Democrats, making. And I say that I have to say that part because people will be like, "Well, I am not a Republican. You will never see me wear that hat." You know what I'm saying? I think that, but I said people are tired of being talked down to. You can't just keep wagging your finger at black people. You can't do it, man. And again, whether it's that campaign, whether it's this, like people don't want to hear that. Why am I listening? Am I listening to that podcast to learn and be better at the end of it? Or am I listening to it so I can also feel like the mean girl on campus and we all laughing at the girl that didn't wear, that who clothes aren't trendy? That's what that's starting to feel like. But here's the thing that you got to know about dealing with black people, especially hood ones. Some of them will slap the shit out of you. I'm not saying nothing about the Native Land podcast. I'm saying, as somebody who speaks in rooms with governors and mayors and doctors and that prestigious group, and somebody who also goes and speaks in churches, goes to NA meetings, meets people where they are, and has a social work background and also grew up homeless, I'm telling you, when some of those people get offended, they're not about to just come back at you with words. It's not about, you think it's about to be a verbal spat. When one of them, well, listen, for the ladies out there that's listening and you on this elite stuff and you one of them people that just found your blackness, when the other girl you talking to looks like she's crying or she starts to take off earrings and put Vaseline on her face, you need to move. To fellas, when the other guy starts to stand up or goes quiet or his head looks around a few times to assess who's all in the room, I'm just saying, everybody's not playing this social media game. Everybody's not trying to go and get clicks because some of these people, these are not case studies for them. These topics are about their lives. When you and I love Obama. You know, I've read for Obama. I look out for Obama in a lot of ways. But I think one of the biggest faux pas of that election was when Obama took it upon himself to talk down to black people, black men specifically, and say the only reason you're not voting for Kamala is because of sexism. It was like, come on, bro. Come on, man. Like you can't. That's up there with Joe Biden saying if you don't vote for him, you're not black. And again, I voted for her. I stomped for them. I gave money to the Democrats, but I knew we were going to lose the entire way. And it's because every time I said this, every time I took the populist stance of like, maybe we should kind of meet people where they at, everybody turned their nose up. Don't you understand that less than 20% of this country, I think, I can double check, I think less than 20% of this country has college degrees, period. That's black, white, or whatever. So, and most people are trying to make ends meet. Most people are looking at things like grocery bills and gas bills and things like that. And when you keep talking past people, even if the other cat is lying, I saw people start to listen to the other cat that's crazy and should have been summarily dismissed. That's my only mention. What's your takeaway or the thing you want this audience to take from you as we start to close out?
No, I think that's actually, you made a very excellent point, and it ties into what I was saying about Brandon. And let's just be real about it. Trump won this election because he took the lessons of the grassroots and took it to his people. These people who are in these think tanks, talking about liberal think tanks, these people who are in establishment Democrat think tanks, they only talk with each other. And they only talk with each other about what they think you should know. What Trump did, even after he got indicted, even after he ended up getting the mugshot, he wrote, I remember when this happened. After he had to fly to Atlanta to get his mugshot taken, he got in his motorcade and rode through Bankhead and took pictures. Now, somebody who's an elitist will think that's just him.
And posted his mugshot as his profile picture, I think. I'm pretty sure he did.
Yeah. Look, the people who are in these elitist think tanks do not realize that outside of your think tanks and outside of Harvard and Yale and Princeton and everything, we live in a 50-cent social media world. We live in a click world. We live in a world where the anti-hero is the hero. And he was very, very good at that. The Democrats are horrible when it comes to ground game, when it comes to like identifying with people. If you are a suburbanite who is a liberal, who moved back into a gentrifying neighborhood, and you put up a Black Lives Matter sign on your lawn, and you do that, and you say, and you hug little black girls on every now and then when you come home, the Democratic Party has a home for you. If you are a black person, black woman, or black man who is not in those circles that Angela Rye and Bakari and all them live in, and you are trying to figure out how you going to decide between, like, do I want a Hot Pocket for lunch today, or do I want to keep the lights on? Am I going to be able to get to work on like $10, $20 worth of gas, or am I going to be able to like feed a dog? When you have those problems, they don't know how to speak to you. And to be honest with you, the Republican side doesn't know how to speak to those people either, but they know how to make them feel heard. And that's how they won, and that's how they continue to win. And if that sort of arrogance and condescension from the Native Land podcast people start going towards the Joe Budden people, because Joe Budden got the people who are struggling every day, they're going to continue to lose, and they're going to continue to have no views.
And they want to laugh. He also has the people that want to, everything ain't so serious. He want to have people that want to talk about music and things like that. I'll say this, man, as somebody who is not a fan of this current administration, and I think that dude is crazy. I don't obsess over him, but I think he's a terrible pick for president. I was very upset with my party because I think there were just so many mistakes being made. And for people that's so smart, it kind of ties back to my other question of how did not one person watch that episode? How, if you got all the smart people, the quote unquote smart people, against this guy with his track record, how did you not steamroll and mop the floor? Oh, you know why? Because Joe Biden also has an ego and does not want to step down, even though that's the plan. And at the same time, we're going to put this person in that the people didn't vote for, that the people didn't like, give her 100 days. I'm reading her book right now too, by the way. I read Tapper's already. They're both very interesting books, by the way. But when the elephants fight, the grass suffers. And these people that we talking about are not the grass. We're the grass. Like, I know the grass. Like, I have the grass in my family. Regardless of how well I do, I get phone calls from people in my family that I am buying groceries for. that I am buying like basic things for. That like they're noticing their gas bill go up. Like, you know what I'm saying? They're like, wait, this shit is $40 more than it was the last 6 months. What's going on? And when you start talking all up here in this highfalutin place, man, you lose people. And I think that that's where, much love to the Native Land Pod. I think they're going to grow from this, like you said. I think that they are going to see some of that criticism. I think it's going to hurt a little bit, but I think they'll be fine. Well, we know they're going to be fine. There's an establishment there. And Mark will go on their show and they'll get another bump. Like they got a plan in place. Shout out to Mark, who I think does a good job of navigating both of those lanes. I don't agree with a lot of things that Mark Lamont Hill where he lands on some stuff, but I do think he's a really smart dude. And I owe him a lot because when I was in grad school, when I was doing my doctorate, I like to do things differently. I would often get told no. There was always a published, peer-reviewed Mark Lamont Hill article that in the world of academia, for those that are listening, your professors and things might say, no, don't do this or whatever the case is. But if you can find an example of peer-reviewed work that does that thing, then you can do that thing. Okay. So Mark Lamont Hill and Chris Emdin were like my go-tos in that. So I have a very special place in my heart for those guys, and I don't agree with them on everything. It's okay not to disagree. But let me go ahead and shore this up. I think in closing, we need platforms that don't look down on our people. We need conversations that value authenticity over credentials. Like I think Joe Budden is doing that. And again, I don't watch every episode of the JBP, but here's the thing. You can't miss that shit either. It's everywhere. Anytime you go on social media, a clip will hit you in the face.
Even if you don't listen to the Joe Budden podcast, you turn on your TV, you're going to be on there with Drewski. I told you it was it. You're going to see him one way or another.
That's what I'm saying. Like
you're going to see Prize Picks or something.
He's penetrated culture. And he takes a lot of heat for it. So, and there'll be criticisms of him. And listen, I got love for all parties involved. I really do. I know it. I really, truly do. And people who don't hear this part, they only hear the criticism. But I admire accomplished people. I'm not in competition with them. We have to get back to when another Black person is successful, we got to see it as our success. And I think that's the issue with a lot of these platforms. So instead of criticizing Joe for not sounding like what some people think intellectuals should sound like, maybe we should be asking why so many people, myself included, feel like outsiders in spaces that's supposed to represent us. If you are in that privileged position and you get behind those walls, can people tell that you actually came from the hood if you're from the hood? And I don't mean that you got to be ghetto. I'm saying, are you advocating to make those people's lives better or just your own? Torraine, I just want to thank you for joining me on this one. Where can people find your work, man?
You can find me at torrainewalker.com. That's basically an amalgamation of all my work on my bylines. And also, if you're interested in doing some brand work and getting some content, some consulting done, you can hit me up there. You can always, probably more than you should, you find me on Twitter. Torraine Walker is my @. You can also check out my Substack, torrainewalker.substack.com. And I also do a series that's going really, really hot with Dr. Tommy J. Curry called the Black Male Study Sessions. Every couple of weeks, we try to put together a conversation about things focused on Black male studies and Black men in general. So that's where all my stuff is. Look me up, run me through your Googles, and it all comes up.
Man, I love that, man. Well, I'm Dr. Charles Cole III, and this has been Color Commentary with Dr. Cole, where we separate the facts from the feelings and still find the humanity in between. Thank you for listening to Color Commentary. We love to hear from you, so drop us an email at colorcommentarypod@gmail. One more time, that's colorcommentarypod@gmail.com. And if you like what you hear, please subscribe to the show, leave us a 5-star rating, share it on social media, and join us every Thursday for more Color Commentary with Dr. Cole. See you next week. Peace.